Marcus Reed stood in the temp agency waiting room holding a job posting that felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. 16 days it had been posted. 23 workers had seen it. Not one had accepted. The night shift at Sterling Tower paid time and a half, $27 an hour instead of $18, but it came with a footnote in small print that explained everything. Previous 3 security guards resigned within first week. His daughter's voice echoed from that morning asking why he always picked the hardest jobs. Marcus didn't have an answer she'd understand. The real answer sat in his bank account, $847, 7 days until rent came due, and a landlord who'd already given him 2 extensions. The real answer was that easy jobs went to people with references, clean employment histories, something other than 2 years of temp work and a crater where a career used to be. 3 years ago, Marcus had managed 40 construction workers on projects worth millions. His biggest worry had been whether city inspectors would sign off on structural calculations. His wife, Sarah, had been alive, and their daughter, Lily, still believed the world made sense, that promises meant something, that mothers came home from hospitals. The receptionist cleared her throat, pen poised. Through the window behind her, Sterling Tower rose 72 stories into Chicago's gray November sky. Marcus had walked past it hundreds of times, never imagining he'd work there. Never imagining he'd become the kind of man desperate enough to take jobs other people refused. He signed the form. 72 floors above the street where Marcus made that choice, Victoria Ashford approved a stack of personnel reports without reading the names. The night shift security position was a line item, nothing more. Someone from facilities would fill it. Someone always did. She'd built Sterling Properties from a $50,000 loan into a billion-dollar empire by trusting systems, delegating to experts, never wasting time on details other people could handle. Her assistant had arranged the morning briefings in their usual order. Financial projections for the Seattle expansion. Quarterly safety summaries, all systems operational, no critical issues. Board meeting agenda. Victoria worked through them with the efficiency that had made her Chicago's youngest self-made billionaire, a fact journalists loved mentioning, and that she found increasingly hollow. Money was a tool, power was a responsibility. But neither one filled the silence of her penthouse at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come and the only company was her own reflection in floor-to-ceiling windows. The safety reports needed her signature. Victoria scanned the summary and signed without reading further. She'd hired the best facilities team money could buy. That's what experts were for. Marcus spent the afternoon with Lily trying to make peanut butter sandwiches feel like a feast. Their apartment on Logan Square's 3rd floor had been temporary 18 months ago. Temporary had a way of becoming permanent when you were poor, settling into corners and making itself comfortable. 650 square feet, $1,100 monthly rent, $200 more than Marcus could consistently afford, but $400 less than anything in a neighborhood where Lily could walk to school without him worrying constantly. Lily sat at the kitchen table, second-hand backpack open beside her, working through math problems with the focused determination of a child who'd learned early that some things mattered and some didn't. She had her mother's eyes, brown and perceptive, and Sarah's way of seeing through the stories adults told to make hard things sound easier. The refrigerator hummed its uneven rhythm, a sound Marcus had stopped hearing except in moments when it reminded him how precarious everything was. One major repair, one unexpected expense, and the careful balance he maintained would collapse. Lily looked up from her homework pen cap between her teeth. "Mrs. Patterson says there's a field trip next month. Natural History Museum." Marcus knew what came next. He'd learned to hear weight behind his daughter's careful words, the way she phrased things to make them sound optional when they mattered desperately. "How much?" $15, but I don't have to go. Sophia says the dinosaurs are boring anyway. Sophia's father was a corporate attorney who drove a BMW and probably didn't count pennies at grocery stores. Marcus felt familiar anger rise, not at Sophia or her father, but at a world that made his daughter pretend she didn't want things because wanting them hurt too much. We'll find $15. You're going. Lily's face brightened, then dimmed again as another worry surfaced. You're working tonight? New job, Sterling Tower, night shift. The really tall one by the lake. Marcus nodded, watching her process this with the seriousness she brought to everything now. 7 years old and already carrying weight no child should bear. Will you be safe? The question hit harder than she meant it to. Sarah's death had taught Lily that parents could disappear, that promises of tomorrow weren't guarantees. Marcus had found her twice in the past year, standing by his bed at night, hand hovering over his chest, making sure he was still breathing. He knelt beside her chair, meeting her eyes at her level. I promise I'll come home, every morning, no matter what. Like Mom promised. The words came without accusation, just the blunt honesty of a child who'd learned that death didn't care about promises. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Mom didn't break her promise, sweetheart. She fought as hard as anyone could fight. Sometimes fighting isn't enough, but I'm healthy, I'm careful, and nothing in this world would keep me from coming back to you. Lily studied his face, deciding whether to trust this. Finally, she nodded and returned to her math. Marcus stood, his knees cracking, feeling every one of his 41 years. A knock brought Maggie Sullivan, their neighbor, from the second floor, carrying Tupperware that smelled like pot roast. Maggie was 62, Irish-American, with the sturdy kindness that came from 3 decades as a Cook County hospital nurse. She'd lost her husband Patrick 5 years ago to a construction accident, and she'd adopted Marcus and Lily the way she seemed to adopt every stray in the building. Made extra, thought Lily might like proper dinner while you're at work. Marcus tried to protest, but Maggie waved him off with the no-nonsense authority she'd probably used with patients refusing medication. Patrick would have wanted me to help. That's what neighbors do. After Maggie left, Lily ate pot roast while Marcus packed his security uniform, cheap polyester that came with the job, a flashlight that barely worked, steel-toed boots from his construction days. The only nice thing he wore was his watch, a Timex he'd bought 20 years ago when he'd gotten his first promotion to site supervisor. Sarah had given it to him, wrapping it in newspaper because they couldn't afford gift wrap back then. Lily noticed him checking the time. You still wear that old watch, even though it's scratched. Marcus looked at the worn face, the leather band he'd replaced twice. Your mom gave me this. It's never been wrong. Not once in 20 years. Keeps perfect time. Like how I'll always come home to you. Perfect timing. Every day. The words felt like a vow to something larger than either of them. Lily reached out and touched the watch face, her small fingers gentle. I'm glad it still works. At 10:45, Marcus stood before Sterling Tower as Chicago winter promised snow. The building rose 72 stories, glass facade reflecting scattered city lights. During the day, this lobby would fill with people whose monthly salaries probably exceeded Marcus's annual income. At night, it belonged to cleaners, maintenance crews, and one security guard who needed the job badly enough to ignore whatever had made 3 people quit in a week. Dave Mitchell, the evening shift guard, was waiting to hand over. 50-something overweight with tired eyes, counting days to retirement. He sized Marcus up with a glance that said he'd seen plenty of temps come and go. You're the new guy, Marcus. That's right. Dave pulled out a keycard and a radio that looked older than Lily. 72 floors, you'll patrol 1 through 40 tonight. Mechanical rooms, stairwells, loading docks. Checklists on the desk. Sign the log every hour. Marcus took the equipment, waiting for whatever warning had made previous guards leave. Dave hesitated, then lowered his voice. Look, some advice. This job's easy if you keep it simple. Walk your rounds, sign the logs. Don't ask questions about stuff that's not your business. What kind of stuff? The kind that gets temps fired. Building this size, there's systems, people responsible for things. Your job is making sure doors are locked and lights are off. Anything else that's above your pay grade. What happened to the last 3 guards? Dave shrugged, already moving toward the exit. They cared too much. Tried to fix problems that weren't theirs to fix. Management doesn't like that. This is a good gig if you don't make waves, but if you go looking for trouble. He didn't finish. The warning hung in the air between them. After Dave left, Marcus stood alone in the vast lobby. Marble floors that probably cost more than his annual salary. Art installations he couldn't begin to price. The kind of wealth that existed in a different world. One he'd stopped believing he'd ever touch again. The security desk had a logbook, coffee-stained and dog-eared. Marcus flipped through recent entries. 6 months ago, detailed notes about every check, every irregularity. Then about 3 months back, entries became sparse. Whoever had been keeping careful records had stopped, or been stopped. The last pages showed something more disturbing. 12 pages had been torn out, completely, remnants visible where they'd been ripped from the binding. Someone had erased recent history. Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Maggie with a photo, Lily asleep on the couch, math homework spread on the coffee table, a stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Below it, a voice message. Marcus pressed play, volume low. Lily's sleepy voice filled the quiet lobby. "Hi, Daddy. Mrs. Sullivan said I could stay up until you texted good night, but I got too sleepy. I hope your new job is okay. You work so hard for us. I love you. See you in the morning." Marcus saved the message, then played it again. The building felt different after that, less empty. He carried his daughter's voice with him like a light through hollow spaces, checking doors and testing locks, doing work someone had to do because the alternative was failing her in ways that mattered more than money. The upper floors were different, less polished, more functional. Server rooms humming with equipment. Mechanical spaces filled with HVAC systems and electrical panels. Marcus moved through them methodically, his construction background kicking in. 15 years of site supervision had taught him to notice when something was wrong before it became critical. By 2 in the morning, he'd covered 40 floors without incident. The isolation was profound silence, almost physical. His footsteps echoed in empty corridors. Elevator chimes rang at random intervals. Automated systems running programmed routines in a building that felt more machine than place where humans worked. At 2:47, Marcus entered mechanical room C on the 58th floor. The checklist marked it as required part of the fire suppression system serving upper floors. The room was 30 by 40 feet, filled with pipes and gauges and equipment that kept the building safe, or should have. The pressure gauge on the main water line stopped him cold. The needle pointed to 38 psi, deep in the red zone. Marcus checked the backup gauge. 37, both showing the same critical failure. Above them, a warning light blinked red, but someone had covered it with black electrical tape as if hiding the problem would make it disappear. Marcus's construction experience kicked in. Fire suppression systems needed minimum 65 psi to function effectively. At 38, sprinklers would engage but deliver barely enough water to slow flames, let alone stop them. 22 floors above this room depended on this system. 5,000 people worked in those spaces during business hours. He checked the maintenance log mounted on the wall. The clipboard was yellowed pages showing months of entries. Every single one for the past 5 months read the same: normal, 95 psi. Different dates, different signatures, J. Corusdims. Kim alternating with mechanical precision. All of them lies. Marcus pulled out his phone and started photographing. The gauges from multiple angles, the maintenance log with its falsified entries, the warning light hidden under tape. His hands were steady, his mind working through implications with methodical approach that had made him a good supervisor. This wasn't negligence. This was deliberate. He continued up through the building, checking other mechanical rooms. Floor 52, 36 psi. Floor 60, 39. Floor 65, 34. The pattern was clear. Everything above the 50th floor was compromised. Everything below ran normally. The irony wasn't lost on him. Executive suites were on upper floors. People who made decisions about maintenance budgets, about what qualified as critical, worked in the very spaces where fire protection had failed, including, he'd learned from a lobby directory, Victoria Ashford's office on 67. At 3:15, Marcus tried the building management hotline. No answer. Emergency maintenance line voicemail full. He found an after-hours number for the building manager in the security binder and dialed. A woman's voice answered on the fourth ring, groggy and irritated. "This is Marcus Reed, overnight security at Sterling Tower. I found a serious problem with the fire suppression system on the upper floors. The pressure is critically low. This needs immediate attention." The voice sharpened, losing sleep and gaining authority. "The system was inspected last month. It's fine." "I'm looking at the gauges right now, ma'am. They're showing 38 psi. Minimum safe operating pressure is 65. If there's a fire..." "Look, I don't know what you think you're seeing, but our systems are inspected quarterly by certified technicians. If there was a problem, they would have caught it." Marcus kept his voice level professional. "The maintenance logs show normal readings, but the actual gauges don't match. Someone's been falsifying records." Silence on the line, but not the thoughtful kind, the defensive kind. "You're new, aren't you? Let me give you some advice. Night shift is simple. Walk your rounds, sign the logs, go home in the morning. Don't create problems that aren't there. It makes everyone's job harder, including yours." The threat came wrapped in helpful advice, but Marcus heard it clearly. "Ma'am, with respect, 5,000 people work in this building during the day. If there's a fire in the upper floors, the temp agency sends us a lot of workers. We only keep the ones who understand their role. Do you understand your role, Mr. Reed?" The line went dead. Marcus stood in the mechanical room surrounded by equipment worth millions, staring at gauges that spelled potential disaster, and felt the familiar weight of a choice he'd made before. Do the right thing and lose everything, or stay quiet and keep the paycheck. He thought about Lily asleep at Maggie's, trusting him to come home. He thought about the field trip she wanted to take, the $15 that represented security and normalcy. He thought about rent due in 7 days and the $847 that wouldn't cover it. Then he thought about Sarah on her hospital bed, weak from chemo, making him promise something that mattered more than survival. "Teach Lily to do what's right, not what's easy. She's watching you, Marcus. She'll always be watching. Be the man she needs to see." Marcus pulled out his phone and played Lily's voice message again. Her sleepy words about him working hard for them, about loving him, about seeing him in the morning. He knew what came next would probably cost him this job and any chance at another in Chicago security. He knew he was choosing principles over survival, integrity over pragmatism. The same choice that had cost him his promotion at Hartman Construction when he'd refused to relocate and leave Lily right after Sarah's death. The same stubborn commitment to doing right that had marked every failure in his employment history. But he also knew that every morning when Lily woke up, she looked at him to understand what kind of world she lived in. And if he stayed silent now, if he let convenience override conscience, he'd be teaching her that safety was negotiable, that lives were less important than paychecks. A person only has one thing nobody can take away: the ability to look in the mirror without having to turn away. Tonight, Marcus chose to keep that. At 3:45, Marcus began documenting everything systematically. He moved through upper floors with purpose, driven by clarity that felt almost like anger but was closer to determination. Every mechanical room, every pressure gauge, every falsified log entry. His photos were meticulous, his notes detailed. 15 years of construction site documentation kicked in, muscle memory taking over. By 4:30, he'd built a case that was irrefutable. The pressure problem affected 22 floors, 2,400 sprinkler heads serving spaces where thousands of people worked daily, all compromised. The risk wasn't theoretical. It was concrete, measurable, and being actively hidden. He found a maintenance office on the 40th floor. The door was unlocked, computer terminal logged in. Someone had been careless or exhausted or simply didn't care. A sticky note next to the monitor showed generic credentials: maintenance. Sterling 2024. Marcus accessed the building management software, searching work orders related to fire suppression. What he found confirmed suspicions. Multiple reports over the past 5 months: pressure drops, warning lights, system anomalies. Everyone marked completed with notes claiming everything was normal. No parts ordered, no repairs logged, just digital checkmarks saying problems had been addressed when they clearly hadn't. He dug deeper, searching email archives. One thread from January stopped him. From Richard Palmer, CFO, to Tom Hendricks, Facilities Director, CC, Victoria Ashford, subject Q1 Cost Optimization, CEO Directive. Per Victoria's mandate to improve operating margins 18%. All departments must implement immediate cost reductions. Facilities, department specifics. Fire suppression system, quarterly inspections reduced to biannual. HVAC maintenance standard cycles extended 30%. Elevator service, monthly checks reduced to bi-monthly, target savings 2.3 mm annually. Please confirm implementation. The reply from Tom Hendricks was brief: confirmed, schedules adjusted, we'll monitor for critical issues. Victoria Ashford's response, dated January 18th, was even shorter. Approved. Forward Q1 savings report. Marcus stared at the screen, at bureaucratic language that translated into dead people if the wrong spark hit at the wrong time. She hadn't said ignore safety, she'd said optimize costs. But the result was the same. Systems failed, records were falsified to hide failure. And the woman whose signature approved it all worked on the 67th floor in an office protected by sprinklers that wouldn't save her. At 5:45, Marcus stood at the manual override panel for the building's fire alert system. Level 2 alert didn't trigger evacuation or activate sprinklers, but it created an official incident report automatically forwarded to the city fire marshal. It would generate questions, investigations, and almost certainly cost Marcus his job. His hand rested on the switch. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to walk away. One more shift, just enough for rent, then find something else. The temp agency would blacklist him. Tom Hendricks would make sure no security company in Chicago hired him. He'd be choosing unemployment, potential homelessness, failure in Lily's eyes. But he'd also be choosing to live with himself, to look his daughter in the face and know he'd done what her mother asked, to be the kind of man who didn't look away when lives were at stake, even when looking away was easier. Marcus activated Level 2 alert at 6:12 in the morning. The system logged it automatically, time-stamped and recorded. Official, irrevocable. He wrote a detailed summary and emailed it to every address he could find. Building Management Facilities, Victoria Ashford's executive assistant board members whose names appeared in public filings, the fire marshal, the insurance company, 3 senior VPs. 12 recipients total. No room for anyone to claim they weren't informed. Then he logged the action in the security system under his own name and credentials. Sat down in the security office and waited for consequences. His phone rang at 6:22. Unknown number. Marcus answered. A man's voice, cold and controlled. "Mr. Reed, this is Tom Hendricks, Facilities Director. I just received your extensive email. You triggered a city alert without authorization. My job description says to report safety hazards immediately. That's what I did. You could have called me first. This is going to create significant complications." I tried calling, multiple numbers, no one answered. A pause. Then the voice hardened. "Your employment with the temp agency is terminated, effective immediately. You'll receive no reference, and I'll make certain every security company in Chicago knows about this incident. Do you understand what you've done to your career?" Marcus understood perfectly. He was blacklisted, unemployable. Financial ruin was coming fast. "I understand that 5,000 people work in this building every day. I understand they trust that safety systems will protect them. And I understand that trust was being violated." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the quiet lobby as dawn crept across Lake Michigan. The city was waking up. People would soon fill this building, riding elevators to offices where they worked beneath sprinklers that might not save them. But now someone knew. Now the fire marshal would investigate. Now maybe possibly the system would be fixed before worst happened. His phone buzzed. Email from the temp agency: employment terminated. Reason: violation of client protocols. This termination will be noted in your permanent file. Marcus signed out in the logbook at 6:45, gathered his jacket, walked through the employee entrance into pale gray Chicago morning. Snow was beginning to fall, light and gentle, the first of the season. He took the L train back to Logan Square, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. He'd done something that might help people he'd never meet, and he'd destroyed the only income keeping his family housed. Both things were true. Both things would have consequences. Maggie was making breakfast when he let himself in. Lily sat at the kitchen table in pajamas, eating cereal, reading a library book about space. She looked up when he entered, and her face transformed into the kind of smile that made everything else feel manageable. Daddy, how was it? Was the building really tall? Marcus sat beside her, letting her chatter wash over him. She told him about the book, about a friend's comment at school, about a science project she wanted to do. He absorbed every word, every gesture, storing them against hard times coming. Whatever happened next, he'd done what he could live with. That was enough. 72 floors above the street where Marcus had just walked into snow, Victoria Ashford arrived at her office at exactly 6:45. 12 years of running Sterling Properties had taught her that discipline created success, that routine eliminated uncertainty, that control over her schedule meant control over her life. The lie had worked long enough that she'd almost forgotten it was a lie. Her corner office overlooked Lake Michigan, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing water that stretched to horizon. The view had cost extra. Everything in this space had cost extra. The Herman Miller chair, $1,400. The espresso machine imported from Italy, $8,000. The silence which money couldn't buy but isolation provided free. Victoria's assistant Claire had already arranged morning briefings, financial projections, market analysis, quarterly reports requiring signature. Victoria worked through them with practiced efficiency, approving expenditures, flagging concerns, processing more information before 8 a.m. than most executives encountered in a full day. This was what success looked like. This was what she'd built when she'd walked away from her family's money at 21, determined to prove she could create an empire without her father's shadow. Robert Ashford had been a Wall Street legend, brilliant, ruthless, rich beyond measure, and dead at 58 from a heart attack in his office alone at midnight, working a deal that probably mattered to no one. Victoria had sworn she'd be different. She'd build something that mattered, create value beyond mere profit. Live a life that wasn't just transaction after transaction. Instead, she'd replicated him perfectly. Same hours, same isolation, same cold efficiency that made board members respect her and employees fear her. The only difference was that Robert Ashford had at least had a wife, however unhappy, and a daughter, however distant. Victoria had neither. She'd sacrificed relationship after relationship on the altar of building Sterling Properties, telling herself there'd be time later, after the next acquisition, the next project, the next milestone. The milestones never stopped coming. The loneliness never stopped growing. At 7:22, an email arrived with a subject line that cut through her morning routine like a knife through silk. Urgent. Fire safety violation report, Sterling Tower. Victoria opened it, expecting routine inspection issue. Some minor code compliance problem facilities would handle. Instead, she found an official incident report from Chicago Fire Department, attached documentation that made her stomach drop, and a name she'd never heard Marcus read. She read the summary once quickly, then again, slowly feeling something cold settle in her chest. Critical fire suppression failure, 22 floors, 38 psi where minimum safe was 65, 5 months of falsified maintenance records. Risk assessment, immediate evacuation recommended. Victoria pulled up building schematics on her second monitor. Floors 50 through 72, the executive suite, her office. Every senior vice president, every director, every member of leadership she'd built worked in the danger zone. They'd been holding meetings, making decisions, running the company from spaces protected by systems that wouldn't save them if fire broke out. The report included 47 photographs. Victoria clicked through them, seeing pressure gauges deep in red zones, maintenance logs with identical falsified entries, warning lights, covered with tape as if hiding evidence would eliminate risk. Someone had been lying for months. Someone had decided that pretending everything was fine was easier than fixing the problem or reporting it. She found video files, clicked the first one, a man's voice steady and professional reading aloud. Data from equipment rooms. This is floor 58, mechanical room C4, 11 a.m., June 23rd. I'm Marcus Reed, night security, fire suppression system pressure 38 psi, code minimum 65 psi. This system serves floors 50 through 72, approximately 5,000 occupants during business hours. At current pressure levels, sprinkler activation would not provide adequate fire suppression. Victoria played it again. The voice wasn't panicked or dramatic, just factual. A man documenting a problem with the same systematic approach someone might use for construction inspection. She opened his personnel file. Almost nothing there. Temp employee, 41 years old, emergency contact neighbor, not family. One dependent, Lily Reed, age 7, a temporary worker, night shift security, the kind of employee who existed in margins of her company, invisible and interchangeable, doing work that kept the building functioning but rarely warranted attention from anyone in the executive suite. This invisible employee had found what her facilities management team had missed or covered up for 5 months. He'd spent his first night documenting everything with thoroughness that suggested training she couldn't see in his sparse file. And judging by the timestamp on the incident report, 6:12 a.m., he'd triggered an official alert knowing it would probably cost him his job. Victoria searched her email archive, found the thread from January that made her want to vomit. Her own signature, her own approval, cost optimization directive, reduce fire system inspections from quarterly to biannual, target savings 2.3 million annually. She hadn't asked what non-critical maintenance meant, hadn't questioned whether fire suppression qualified as critical. She'd trusted her CFO's judgment, signed off on the recommendation, and moved on to the next decision. 5 months later, systems were failing. Records were being falsified, and she'd been working 70 feet above ground in an office protected by sprinklers that might deliver water pressure barely sufficient to make flames wet. Victoria stood and walked to her window. Below, the city was waking up. Traffic building on Lakeshore Drive. People walking to work, grabbing coffee, starting their days with no idea that the building they were entering had been one spark away from disaster. She'd built this empire on attention to detail, on knowing more than competitors, on staying ahead of problems before they became critical. And she'd completely missed this. Delegated it. Trusted it. Let it disappear into machinery of systems and experts and quarterly reports she'd signed without reading. Her phone buzzed. Tom Hendricks requesting urgent meeting. Victoria ignored it. She opened Marcus Reed's file again, staring at minimal information. 41. Temp worker, daughter, nothing else. Just a gap where a life should be visible. She pulled up his background check, the basic version they ran on all security personnel. Minimal criminal record, nothing. Previous employment, Hartman construction site supervisor, 24 years. Termination reason, company bankruptcy. That explained the gap, but 24 years in one place meant loyalty, consistency, skills. Victoria clicked deeper, paying $50 fee for extended background report. What came back told a story her personnel system had missed completely. Marcus Reed had been promoted 5 times at Hartman. Safety certifications, management training, commendations for identifying structural problems before they became disasters. Then 3 years ago, his wife Sarah died, 18 months of medical bills, $340,000 in debt after insurance. Bankruptcy filing 2 years ago. Employment history after Hartman was a litany of short-term positions, warehouse work, delivery driver, security at facilities that closed or downsized. The pattern was clear: skilled professional reduced to survival employment, taking whatever work came because beggars couldn't choose careers. And last night, this man with everything to lose had chosen to document a safety violation so thoroughly that the fire marshal's office would have to act. He'd known the cost. The email from Tom Hendricks terminating his employment was time-stamped 6:23 a.m., 37 minutes after the incident report. Marcus Reed had worked one shift, found a problem that could kill thousands, reported it properly, and been fired before his daughter woke up. Victoria sat down, something unfamiliar happening in her chest. It felt like shame. It felt like recognition. It felt like seeing clearly for first time in years just how far she'd drifted from the person she'd intended to be. She called her driver. 20 minutes later, Victoria stood before a 3-story brick building that had seen better decades. The front door's lock was broken, hallway inside, smelling of cooking grease and age. She climbed stairs lit by fluorescent lights that flickered with every third breath. Her heels clicked on linoleum that needed replacement. This was poverty, not the theoretical kind discussed in boardrooms or philanthropic galas, but concrete kind where people lived in buildings that weren't quite condemned but weren't quite safe, where children did homework at kitchen tables in apartments that cost too much and delivered too little, where a man with 24 years of professional experience worked night security because the economy had chewed him up and spit him into margins. Victoria found apartment 312 at the end of a narrow corridor. She stood there for a moment, composing herself. Victoria Ashford didn't get nervous. She'd faced hostile board members, aggressive investors, journalists hunting for scandal. But standing in this dim hallway, about to knock on the door of a man whose life she'd inadvertently damaged, she felt something close to fear. She knocked. Light footsteps approached. The door opened to reveal a girl of about 7, brown hair in a ponytail, wearing pajamas decorated with cartoon astronauts. She looked Victoria up and down with unself-conscious assessment only children managed. "Hello, are you here to fire my daddy again?" The question hit like a physical blow. Victoria found herself without words, which wasn't a sensation she experienced often. "No, I work at the building where your father was last night. I need to speak with him." The girl's expression shifted, protective and wary beyond her years. "He didn't do anything wrong. He always does the right thing even when it's hard. That's what he tells me." Before Victoria could respond, a man appeared behind the girl, tall, lean, exhausted, the face from the driver's license photo, but harder, more worn. His hand settled on his daughter's shoulder with gentleness that spoke of careful love. "Lily, go finish your breakfast with Mrs. Sullivan, please." The girl looked between them, clearly wanting to stay, clearly protecting her father from whatever new disaster this stranger might bring. Finally, she retreated, casting one more protective glance at Victoria. Marcus Reed stepped into the doorway. Didn't invite Victoria in. Made it clear this was his space and she was not welcome without explicit permission. His eyes were alert despite obvious exhaustion, taking in her expensive coat, her careful posture, the black sedan visible through the hallway window. "You're from Sterling Tower." "I own Sterling Tower. I'm Victoria Ashford." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Recalculation. I know who you are. If you're here to explain why I'm fired, you could have called the temp agency." Victoria felt the words like a slap. Deserved, accurate. "I'm not here to fire you. You've already been fired. I'm here to understand why you did what you did." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. Not hostile, but not welcoming either. 5,000 people work in that building every day. They deserve to be safe. The fire system was failing. Someone needed to report it. 3 other security guards worked that same shift. They walked past the same equipment. They didn't report anything. Then they weren't doing their jobs. The simplicity of it. The complete absence of doubt or complexity. Victoria felt something crack in the careful armor she'd built over 12 years of business success. "You knew reporting it would cost you your employment." "Yes. You did it anyway." Marcus studied her face, deciding how much honesty to offer. "My daughter asked me once why I always pick the hardest jobs. I didn't have a good answer, but I know why I reported that fire system." Because if I didn't and something happened, I'd have to look her in the eye knowing I chose my paycheck over people's lives. I can't live with that. So I made the choice I can live with. Victoria heard the words settle into her chest with unexpected weight. She'd sat through countless presentations about corporate ethics, read articles about stakeholder responsibility, attended seminars on sustainable business practices. But she'd never heard anyone explain moral choice this simply. A father wanting to look his daughter in the eye. No calculation, no weighing of personal benefit against personal risk. Just clarity about what mattered. The pressure problem wasn't isolated. My facilities team completed their preliminary investigation. The fire suppression system has been compromised for 5 months. Falsified maintenance records, deferred repairs. If you hadn't filed that report, we might not have found it until catastrophe forced our attention. Marcus absorbed this without visible reaction. So what happens now? Victoria reached into her coat and withdrew a business card. Heavy cream stock, embossed lettering. The kind of card that signaled importance. I'm offering you a position, not security. Corporate safety director reporting directly to me. Your job would be finding problems everyone else misses. Asking questions that make people uncomfortable, being exactly what you were last night but with authority and resources. She extended the card. Marcus looked at it but didn't take it. Why, you don't know anything about me except that I made trouble for your company. I know everything I need to know. I know that when you were alone at 3 in the morning with problems that weren't your responsibility, you chose to act. I know you documented everything carefully instead of just disappearing. I know you did the right thing knowing it would cost you everything. Victoria lowered the card slightly but didn't withdraw it. That kind of integrity isn't something I can train or buy. It either exists in a person or it doesn't. It exists in you. Marcus finally spoke, his voice quiet. I have a 7th grade education, Ms. Ashford. I worked construction for 24 years. I don't know anything about corporate environments or safety management at this level. You know more than anyone on my current team. They have degrees, certifications, years of experience, and they completely missed or actively hid a critical failure. You found it in one night because you actually looked. Lily's voice drifted from inside the apartment, talking to someone Victoria assumed was the neighbor. Marcus glanced back, then returned his attention to Victoria. My daughter has a school presentation Tuesday, parent observation day. She's been preparing for 2 weeks. I need to be there. You'll have the day, and every day she needs you. The salary is $165,000 annually. Full benefits including health coverage for both of you. Signing bonus of $25,000. Flexible schedule. Marcus stared at her. The numbers were probably incomprehensible. 3 times what he'd made as supervisor, more than he'd earned in 2 years of temp work combined. I need to think about it. Victoria nodded, placing the card on a narrow shelf beside the door. Take all the time you need. The offer doesn't expire, but Mr. Reed, whatever you decide, I want you to know that what you did matters. Not just to the people in my building, to me personally. I've spent 12 years building systems and trusting reports. Last night you showed me that all of it means nothing if no one's willing to see what's actually there. She turned toward the stairs. Behind her, she heard the soft click of Marcus's door closing. The sound felt more significant than any board vote, any acquisition, any quarterly earnings report. It felt like the door to possibility she hadn't known existed. Victoria walked back down 3 flights, her heels clicking on worn linoleum. Her mind already moving through changes she needed to make. Not just in facilities management, in herself. She was almost to her car when she heard rapid footsteps behind her. Turned to see Marcus standing on the building's front steps, the business card in his hand. Ms. Ashford, Victoria stopped. My daughter's presentation is Tuesday at 10 a.m. If I take this position, I need to be there, not I'll try. I need your word. You have it. Marcus nodded slowly, something in his posture shifting. Then I'll see you Monday morning. He didn't smile, but there was something in his expression that looked like the beginning of trust, or hope, or maybe just the first breath after nearly drowning. Victoria returned to her car. As her driver pulled away from the curb, she looked back at the building. 3 stories of worn brick housing families who worked harder than most people she knew. Struggling for stability her board members took for granted. Somewhere in apartment 312, a man was probably trying to explain to his 7-year-old daughter that everything had just changed, that the nightmare of unemployment and potential homelessness had transformed into possibility. Victoria pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. She had calls to make, changes to implement, people to fire and systems to overhaul. But first she had to sit with uncomfortable recognition that Marcus Reed making less in a month than she spent on shoes had taught her something fundamental about what leadership actually meant. It wasn't about having the most money or biggest empire or most impressive quarterly returns. It was about being willing to see clearly when seeing clearly was inconvenient. About choosing integrity when integrity cost everything. About understanding that people's lives mattered more than profit margins. Maybe it wasn't too late to change. Maybe hiring Marcus Reed was the first real decision she'd made in years. That wasn't about building the empire, but about becoming someone worthy of leading it. The snow was falling heavier now, covering Chicago in white. Through the car window, Victoria watched the city transform familiar streets, becoming something new and clean. Maybe that's what this morning was. A chance to start over, to build something better than what had come before. Marcus Reed had given her that chance. The least she could do was take it. Marcus stood in his new office on the 40th floor Monday morning, staring at a desk that probably cost more than 3 months of his previous salary. Dual monitors, ergonomic chair, a window overlooking the Chicago River. The nameplate read Marcus Reed, Corporate Safety Director. 3 days ago he'd been unemployed. Now he was making decisions that affected thousands of people across Victoria Ashford's real estate empire. The transition hadn't been seamless. Friday afternoon, Victoria's assistant had called with instructions: report Monday at 9, bring identification for HR, processing, dress code, business casual. Marcus owned 1 suit purchased at Macy's for Sarah's funeral and 2 pairs of khakis that had seen better years. Saturday morning, he'd taken $200 from Victoria's signing bonus and bought clothes at a discount outlet, feeling guilty about every purchase while Lily insisted he needed to look professional. Sunday night, she'd helped him pick which shirt to wear, treating it like the most important decision in the world. Her enthusiasm made the guilt worse. She didn't understand that corporate jobs came with expectations, that people who climbed this high rarely accepted someone who'd started at the bottom, that Marcus's lack of degree and polished background made him an anomaly his new colleagues would resist. The first meeting confirmed his fears. 9:30 Monday morning, Victoria assembled her executive team in the main conference room. 12 people, all with advanced degrees, all with decades of corporate experience, all looking at Marcus like he was a mistake. Someone would correct shortly. Victoria introduced him without preamble. This is Marcus Reed, our new corporate safety director. He reports directly to me. His authority supersedes facilities management on all safety-related decisions. Any questions about his qualifications can be directed to me personally. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Tom Hendricks wasn't present, administrative leave, Victoria had explained earlier, but his absence felt like an accusation. You fired the facilities director and replaced him with a temp guard. The unspoken question hung in the air. What had Marcus done to earn this position besides cause trouble? Richard Palmer, the CFO who'd recommended the cost cuts that created the fire system failure, spoke first. With respect, Ms. Ashford, safety oversight traditionally falls under facilities management. Creating a separate position seems redundant. Victoria's expression didn't change, but her voice carried an edge Marcus hadn't heard before. Facilities management failed to identify a critical system failure for 5 months. They falsified maintenance records. They ignored warnings. I'm not interested in traditional approaches that produce those results. Marcus found the problem in one night because he actually looked. That's the qualification that matters. The meeting continued with forced politeness masking resentment. Marcus took notes, absorbing information about properties in Seattle, Detroit, and Boston. Systems he'd need to audit, procedures he'd need to understand, the magnitude of responsibility settling on him like weight. After the meeting, a senior vice president named Gerald Hutchins cornered him in the hallway. 60-something, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your place in the hierarchy. Word of advice, Reed: corporate environments have protocols, hierarchies. People who've earned their positions over decades don't appreciate outsiders disrupting established systems. Marcus met his eyes without flinching. People who earned their positions over decades should have caught a fire safety violation before a temp guard found it. If the established system produces that result, maybe it needs disrupting. Hutchins's expression hardened. You're making enemies quickly. That's not a smart strategy for someone who needs allies. I'm not here to make allies. I'm here to keep people safe. The older man walked away, and Marcus felt isolation settle deeper. He'd expected resistance. Understanding it intellectually didn't make experiencing it easier. Every conversation felt like a test he was failing. Every meeting reminded him he lacked vocabulary, credentials, background. These people took for granted. By Wednesday, the pattern was clear. Lower-level employees, maintenance workers, security staff, cleaning crews, treated Marcus with cautious respect. They recognized one of their own who'd somehow crossed the divide between labor and management. But the executive tier closed ranks. Emails went unanswered. Meeting invitations disappeared. Information he requested took days to materialize. Victoria noticed. Thursday morning, she called him into her office. You're getting pushback. Marcus had learned quickly that Victoria valued directness over diplomacy. Yes, they think I don't belong here. They're probably right. They think you're a threat to the way things have always worked. They're definitely right about that. She gestured for him to sit. The view behind her stretched across Lake Michigan, boats cutting white lines through blue water. I hired you because you saw what they chose not to see. That makes them uncomfortable. It should. But it also means you'll face resistance that has nothing to do with your competence and everything to do with protecting their territory. How do I handle it? By being better than they are. By finding problems they miss. By proving every day that competence matters more than credentials. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. The fire marshal wants to meet. His investigation found additional issues. They're requiring a full building evacuation for emergency repairs. We'll lose 3 days of operations. Marcus did the math. Sterling Tower housed dozens of companies. 3 days of lost productivity, relocated operations, tenant complaints. The financial impact would be significant. I'm sorry. Victoria looked at him sharply. For what? For finding a problem that could have killed people. Don't apologize for doing your job correctly when others failed at theirs. But Marcus felt the weight anyway. His report had triggered consequences rippling beyond his control, companies scrambling for temporary space, employees working from home, revenue lost. He'd done the right thing, but right things still caused damage. Friday afternoon brought worse news. The temp agency called. They'd been contacted by 3 other security companies in Chicago, all asking about Marcus Reed's employment history. Tom Hendricks was making good on his threat. The blacklist was spreading. Marcus mentioned it to Victoria during their weekly safety review. She listened, her expression unreadable. Tom is petty and vindictive, also unemployed. I terminated him yesterday after the full investigation confirmed he knew about the pressure problems and ordered technicians to falsify logs rather than report failures. He'll blame me for that. He should blame himself. But men like Tom rarely accept responsibility. Victoria made a note on her tablet. I'll handle the security companies. Your employment history with Sterling Properties will speak for itself. Give it time. Time was something Marcus had in limited supply. Lily's school presentation was Tuesday, 5 days away, and she'd been preparing obsessively. Every night she practiced her speech about why her father was her hero, refining it with seriousness she brought to everything important. Marcus had promised to attend. The first promise he'd made that didn't involve basic survival in 3 years. Monday evening, he worked late reviewing safety protocols for the Detroit property. Structural reports, fire system documentation, elevator maintenance records. The complexity was staggering. Each building had dozens of systems, hundreds of potential failure points, thousands of ways for oversight to miss critical issues. His phone rang at 7:30. Maggie Sullivan. "Marcus, Lily's running a fever. 101. She's asking for you." He was out the door in 90 seconds, taking stairs rather than wait for elevator, running 6 blocks to the L station. The train felt impossibly slow. Every stop added minutes to his daughter's discomfort. Maggie met him at the apartment door, concern written across her face. "She spiked about an hour ago. I gave her children's Tylenol. She's been asking when you're coming home." Lily lay on the couch wrapped in blankets despite the warm apartment. Her face was flushed, eyes too bright. When she saw Marcus, relief flooded her expression. "Daddy, you came." "Of course I came, sweetheart." He felt her forehead hot but not dangerous, checked her throat red but not alarming. Sarah had taught him basic triage during her nursing school days. Knowledge that felt inadequate now that he was solely responsible. "My head hurts." "I know. The medicine will help soon." Lily's hand found his, gripping with strength of a child seeking reassurance. "You won't leave even though you have important work?" The question cut deeper than she meant it to. Marcus settled beside her, pulling her against him. "Nothing is more important than you. Nothing. The work will wait. I'm here." She relaxed slightly, fever making her drowsy. Sophie's dad missed her recital last week for a business trip, she cried. "I won't miss your presentation Tuesday. I promised. I keep my promises." Like Mom tried to keep hers. Marcus closed his eyes against the pain of that innocent question. Sarah had promised to be there for birthdays, graduations, first dates, all the milestones that mattered. Cancer hadn't cared about promises. Mom kept every promise she could control. She fought as hard as anyone could fight. "Some things are beyond our control, but the things I can control, being here, showing up, putting you first, those promises I can keep. And I will." Lily fell asleep against his shoulder. Marcus sat in the dim apartment, feeling her fever gradually decrease, listening to her breathing steady. This was what mattered. Not the office on the 40th floor, not the title or salary or Victoria Ashford's expectations. This moment. This child, this promise. His phone buzzed. Email from Victoria sent at 9:15 p.m. Fire marshal investigation complete. Full report attached. Building reopens Monday. Repairs cost 3.2 million. Worth every penny. Thank you for finding this. Marcus opened the report, scrolling through pages of technical findings, multiple system failures, full system. Evidence of deferred maintenance across 18 months, not 5 months. Falsified records dating back further than anyone had suspected. Criminal referrals for 3 maintenance contractors. The scope was staggering. If there had been a major fire, the catastrophe would have been worse than anyone imagined. More floors affected, more systems compromised, more lives at risk. He'd been one night security guard doing a routine check, and he'd stumbled into systemic failure that threatened thousands. The weight of it pressed down, mixing with relief that disaster had been prevented. Anger that it had been allowed to develop, and bone-deep exhaustion from trying to navigate a corporate world he barely understood. Lily stirred, murmuring something about her presentation. Marcus smoothed her hair, feeling her forehead cooler now, the Tylenol working. She'd be fine by Tuesday. He'd be there in the audience, watching her present about integrity and doing the right thing, hoping desperately that she never had to learn how hard those choices actually were. Tuesday morning arrived with Lily's fever gone and her nervousness peaking. She'd changed outfits 3 times, practiced her speech twice during breakfast, and asked Marcus 17 times if he was absolutely certain he'd be there. Each repetition carried weight of a child who'd learned that promises could break through no fault of the promiser. Marcus wore his new suit, the one Lily had helped him pick. She'd declared him very professional with grave seriousness of a 7-year-old fashion consultant. They took the bus together to Lincoln Elementary. Lily, clutching the poster board she'd made showing Sterling Tower fire sprinklers and a hand-drawn version of Marcus in his security uniform. The school library had been converted into a presentation space. 20 students, 40 parents, one teacher who looked overwhelmed by logistics. Marcus found a seat in the back, feeling conspicuously overdressed among parents in jeans and sweatshirts who'd taken time from hourly jobs for this mid-morning event. Lily presented fifth after a boy who discussed his father, the firefighter, and a girl whose mother worked as a chef. She walked to the front with her poster board, cleared her throat, and began. My hero is my dad, Marcus Reed. He works as corporate safety director at Sterling Tower, making sure people are safe, but that's not why he's my hero. Marcus felt his chest tighten. They'd practiced this speech a dozen times. He knew every word, but hearing her deliver it to an audience watching her small frame straighten with determination made it new again. 3 weeks ago, my dad took a job nobody wanted, night security. He needed money for our rent. But on his first night, he found something broken that could hurt people. Lots of people. 5,000 people. She held up her poster, pointing to hand-drawn sprinklers. The fire safety system wasn't working right. Other people had seen it but didn't tell anyone. My dad knew if he told the truth he'd lose his job. We might lose our home. But he told the truth anyway. Her voice wavered slightly. Marcus leaned forward, willing her strength. He told the truth because he says a person only has one thing nobody can take away: the ability to look in the mirror without having to turn away. He lost his job that night, but he got it back, plus a better one, because the owner of the building, Ms. Victoria Ashford, saw that truth-telling matters more than keeping quiet. Lily looked directly at Marcus. My dad is my hero because he does what's right even when it's hard. Even when it costs him, even when he's scared. That's what real heroes do. The applause was genuine. Other parents nodded, recognizing essential truth in a child's simple words. Marcus felt something break open in his chest. Pride and pain mixing until he couldn't separate them. After the presentation, parents mingled awkwardly, making small talk while children basked in attention. Lily stayed close to Marcus, her hand in his, needing physical connection to anchor the adrenaline. The teacher, Mrs. Patterson, approached. Mr. Reed, Lily's presentation was remarkable. The way she articulates values at her age is unusual. You've clearly had important conversations about integrity. Marcus thought about conversations in a dim apartment, about promises made over cheap dinners, about a dying woman making him swear to teach their daughter what mattered. Her mother started those conversations. I'm just trying to finish them. Understanding crossed the teacher's face, widow, single parent doing his best. Well, you're doing beautifully. Lily is a special child. Walking back to catch the bus, Lily swung their joined hands, satisfaction radiating from her like heat. Did I do good? You did perfectly. I'm so proud of you. Were you scared I'd mess up? Marcus stopped kneeling to meet her eyes. I'm never scared when I watch you do something important. You know why? Because you prepare, you work hard, you care about doing your best. Those things matter more than perfection. You showed everyone today who you are. That's all that matters. Lily hugged him fierce and quick, then released him and started walking again. Marcus followed, feeling weight of responsibility settle differently. He was raising a human being who would carry forward the values he modeled. Every choice he made taught her what mattered. Every compromise showed her what was negotiable. Every stand for principle demonstrated what was worth protecting. The weight was crushing. It was also clarifying. When corporate politics got complicated, when Hutchins or others pressured him to compromise, he just had to imagine Lily watching. Would this choice make her proud? Would it teach her something worth learning? If the answer was no, the decision was simple. 6 weeks into his position, Marcus received an anonymous email. No subject line. Sender address: throwaway account from a public library computer. The message contained 3 attachments: internal memos from Sterling Properties' Boston office, documenting structural concerns flagged by an engineer 2 years ago, then systematically ignored. The concerns weren't minor. Load-bearing columns showing stress fractures, foundations settling unevenly, recommendations for immediate assessment buried under responses prioritizing tenant retention over inspection costs. The building housed 350 employees across 12 floors. If structural problems had progressed, evacuation might be necessary. If they'd been ignored long enough, collapse wasn't impossible. Marcus forwarded everything to Victoria with a single line: Boston property needs immediate structural assessment. Anonymous source, but documentation appears legitimate. Her response came within minutes. Retain independent engineering firm. Full inspection. I want results in 2 weeks. The Boston property manager, a woman named Catherine Wells, who'd worked for Sterling for 15 years, reacted to the inspection notice with barely contained fury. Her call to Marcus started professional and deteriorated rapidly. You're ordering a $100,000 structural assessment based on anonymous allegations. Do you understand what that does to our operational budget? Marcus kept his voice level. I understand what structural failure does to 350 people. The assessment happens. How you adjust your budget is your decision. This is exactly the kind of overreach Tom warned us about. You're creating problems to justify your position. Tom falsified safety records and got fired. If you want to follow his example, keep obstructing legitimate safety concerns. Catherine hung up. 20 minutes later, Victoria called. Catherine complained to the board, said you're exceeding your authority, disrupting operations, costing unnecessary money. Gerald Hutchins is backing her. They want your inspection order reversed. Marcus felt familiar dread settle. He'd been here before. Authority challenged, position threatened, forced to choose between backing down or pushing forward into unemployment. What do you want me to do? I want you to order the inspection exactly as planned. I'll handle Catherine and Gerald. Your job is finding problems. My job is dealing with people who don't want problems found. The engineering firm completed their assessment in 10 days. Their report confirmed everything the anonymous source had documented and found additional concerns. Load-bearing columns had stress fractures that had propagated significantly in 2 years. Foundation settling had accelerated. Immediate remediation required, or the building needed evacuation pending repairs. Cost estimate $4 million. Timeline 6 months. Alternative: close the building, relocate tenants, risk losing them permanently. Victoria called an emergency board meeting. Marcus wasn't invited, but he heard the aftermath from Claire, Victoria's assistant, who'd become an unexpected ally. Palmer wanted to fire you. Called the inspection wasteful, your methodology reckless, said you're costing the company millions based on hunches. Gerald backed him. 3 others were persuadable. What happened? Ms. Ashford presented the engineering report, asked if they'd prefer spending $4 million on repairs or $400 million on wrongful death lawsuits after a collapse, asked if they wanted to explain to shareholders why they ignored documented structural problems. The vote was 8-4 to proceed with repairs and maintain your authority. Marcus should have felt relief. Instead, he felt exhaustion. Every decision was a battle. Every safety concern faced resistance from people protecting budgets, reputations, comfortable assumptions. He was winning battles but hemorrhaging energy in the process. 3 months after the safety protocols launched, Marcus received another anonymous email. This one contained documentation about wage theft at Sterling's Seattle property. Contracted cleaning crews being shorted hours. Immigrant workers afraid to complain, systematic exploitation happening under the company's name, if not its direct authority. Marcus forwarded it to Victoria with growing concern. His mandate was safety, not labor practices. But exploitation created safety risks: overworked employees, cutting corners, fearful workers, hiding problems, systemic injustice breeding the kind of negligence that killed people. Victoria responded by expanding his authority. Corporate Safety and Ethics Director, mandate to investigate any practice that created risk, whether physical danger or systematic abuse. She hired 2 additional staff to support him: a former OSHA inspector and a labor attorney who'd spent 15 years fighting workplace exploitation. The wage theft investigation revealed systematic problems across 3 properties. Marcus compiled evidence, presented it to Victoria, and watched her terminate contracts with 2 firms, sue a third, and implement new oversight requiring direct payment verification for all contract workers. The industry noticed. Business journals ran articles about Sterling Properties' aggressive ethics stance, speculating whether it was genuine reform or expensive public relations. Competitors mocked the costs. Labor advocates praised the precedent. Marcus didn't care about commentary. He cared that workers started getting paid correctly, that safety improved when people weren't exhausted from extra unpaid hours, that doing the right thing created ripples beyond immediate impact. December brought Chicago's first significant snow. Marcus stood at his office window watching white blanket the city, thinking about the year that had passed. 12 months ago, he'd been desperate, taking a job nobody wanted because rent was due and options were gone. Now he directed a department, earned enough to move Lily into a better apartment, worked alongside people who respected competence over credentials. The journey felt impossible in retrospect. One decision document, the fire system failure, instead of staying silent, had cascaded into complete life transformation. But it hadn't been magic, it had been consequence. He'd chosen integrity when integrity cost everything, and somehow that choice had created opportunities he couldn't have imagined. Christmas week brought Victoria to Marcus's office unannounced. She'd been doing that more often lately, dropping by to discuss findings, ask questions, check progress. The visits felt less like oversight and more like collaboration. Equals working toward shared purpose. This time she carried a box wrapped in silver paper. For Lily, I know it's not Christmas yet, but I'm leaving for Boston tomorrow and wanted to give it to you directly. Marcus accepted the gift, uncertain how to respond. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Open it. Inside was a junior microscope, professional quality, the kind that cost several $100s. The note read, for a future engineer who asks good questions and cares about keeping people safe. VA. Marcus felt his throat tighten. This is too much. It's exactly right. Lily is brilliant and curious, and she's going to do extraordinary things. Someone should encourage that. Sarah would have. Since she can't, I'm stepping in. The mention of Sarah should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like recognition. Victoria wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was acknowledging absence and offering support within appropriate boundaries. Thank you. She'll love this. Victoria lingered, and Marcus recognized body language of someone wanting to say more but uncertain how. Finally, I'm having a small dinner party New Year's Eve. Close friends, colleagues I actually like, very informal. I'd like you and Lily to come, if you're comfortable with that. The invitation surprised him. Their relationship had been professional, occasionally crossing into personal territory, but always maintaining clear boundaries. A dinner party felt different, more intimate. A statement that they'd moved beyond employer-employee into something more complex. I'd need to check with Lily, but if she's comfortable, yes, we'd like that. Victoria smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her usual careful control. Good. I'll send details. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear, Chicago winter asserting itself with temperatures in the teens and wind that cut through every layer. Marcus dressed carefully, the suit he'd bought in summer now familiar and comfortable, the watch Sarah had given him, shoes he'd polished the night before. Lily wore a dress Maggie had helped her pick, deep blue with small stars embroidered on the hem, looking older than 7 and still entirely herself. Victoria's penthouse overlooked the city from 40 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Chicago, preparing for midnight. The gathering was small, perhaps 20 people, mixing Sterling Properties executives Marcus recognized with others from Victoria's life outside work. Warm, informal, nothing like the stiff corporate events he'd imagined. Lily gravitated toward Victoria immediately, thanking her for the microscope with earnest enthusiasm. Victoria listened with genuine attention, asking questions about what Lily planned to examine, first suggesting possibilities, treating a 7-year-old's scientific aspirations with the same seriousness she'd give a board presentation. Watching them, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. Not romance. Victoria had never indicated interest, and Marcus wasn't looking. but recognition. Victoria had been building empire in isolation, sacrificing human connection for achievement. Marcus had been surviving in isolation, sacrificing everything for Lily's welfare. Both of them had been alone in different ways. Maybe they didn't have to be. Maybe connection was possible between people from wildly different circumstances if they shared values that mattered more than background. Maybe loneliness was choice as much as circumstance, and choosing different was available to anyone willing to risk vulnerability. Near midnight, Victoria found Marcus on the balcony where he'd stepped for air. The city spread below like a circuit board, lights everywhere, life continuing in millions of small dramas he'd never know. "Thank you for coming. It means more than you probably realize." Marcus turned from the view. "Thank you for inviting us. This is the first social event I've attended since Sarah died. I'd forgotten how to be around people outside survival mode. I've forgotten how to be around people who aren't transactional. Everyone in my usual circle wants something investment connection access. You and Lily are here because I enjoy your company. That's rare." They stood in companionable silence watching the city. Inside, Lily laughed at something one of Victoria's friends said. The sound carried through glass, pure and delighted, the sound of a child who felt safe enough to be fully herself. "She's thriving. You should be proud." "I'm terrified constantly that I'm failing her, that she'll realize I have no idea what I'm doing. That one wrong decision will damage her permanently." Victoria laughed softly. "Welcome to everyone's parenting experience. We're all improvising and hoping we don't break the people depending on us." "You don't have children?" "No, but I have 200 employees depending on me to make decisions that protect their lives and livelihoods. Same terror, different context. We can't guarantee perfection. We can guarantee effort, intention, care. That has to be enough." The countdown began inside, people shouting numbers, champagne ready, the performative celebration of time's arbitrary marker. Marcus and Victoria stayed on the balcony watching the city instead of the clock. At midnight, fireworks erupted over the lake. Navy piers display painting the sky in colors that reflected off ice and water and glass. The city celebrated another year, survived another revolution, completed the endless human insistence that time passing meant something beyond simple accumulation. "Here's to the year ahead. May it be less catastrophic than the one behind." Marcus raised his glass. "To doing what's right even when it costs everything. You taught me that's possible at levels I hadn't imagined." "You taught me first. I just had more resources to deploy." They touched glasses, a small gesture marking something larger: partnership, friendship, shared commitment to values that transcended profit and survival. The city spread below, indifferent to their small drama. But standing together in winter cold, watching Chicago celebrate, Marcus felt possibility open like a door. The year ahead would bring challenges, systems to build, resistance to face, constant battle between what was right and what was easy. But he wouldn't face it alone anymore. Victoria was ally, Maggie was family. Lily was growing strong and principled. The isolation that had defined 3 years of widowhood and survival had transformed into connection. Sarah would have approved. She'd made him promise to teach Lily integrity, but she'd also made him promise to keep living, to find joy again, to build a life that mattered beyond mere survival. He was finally keeping both promises. Inside, Lily was showing someone her hands-on science demonstration about pressure and water distribution, using Victoria's champagne glasses to illustrate principles she'd learned building her science fair project. Her enthusiasm was infectious, her knowledge impressive for 7 years old. Her confidence a testament to a childhood that had included hardship but also unwavering love. Marcus watched his daughter, felt Victoria's companionable presence beside him. Heard laughter and conversation from people who'd become community, and thought, this is what I was fighting for. Not wealth, not status, not even security, though security helped. But connection, purpose, the ability to look in mirrors without flinching. The knowledge that when Lily asked why he did hard things, he had answers worth believing. The fire system failure had seemed like disaster. Unemployment terror, the edge of homelessness looming. Instead, it had been catalyst. One choice document instead of ignore speak, instead of silence, risk everything for principle had cascaded into transformation he couldn't have imagined. Marcus had learned that in mechanical rooms at 3 a.m. documenting failures while his job dissolved. Victoria had learned it threatening to destroy her empire unless her board prioritized people over profit. Different contexts, same essential truth. People who'd paid for that truth with everything they had would keep paying. The board would resist. Property managers would complain. Industries built on cutting corners wouldn't celebrate someone demanding better. But resistance didn't invalidate truth. It just proved truth mattered. Walking home through snow-covered streets as January's first hours unfolded, Lily's hand in his and Maggie waiting at their apartment to hear about the party, Marcus felt something he'd thought lost forever. Hope. Not naive optimism that everything would be easy, but grounded recognition that hard things were possible. He'd survived catastrophe, rebuilt from nothing, found work that mattered, raised a daughter who knew integrity meant more than comfort, connected with people who shared values worth protecting. Sarah would have been proud. That thought, once agonizing, had become comfort. She wasn't here to see Lily thrive, to witness Marcus's transformation, to enjoy the life they'd rebuilt from ruin. But she'd made possible everything that followed by teaching him what mattered before she died. Teach Lily to do right, not easy. Show her that people matter. Be the kind of man who can look in mirrors without turning away. He'd kept the promise, was keeping it still, would keep it tomorrow and every day after. That was enough. That was everything. That was the only legacy that actually mattered. The city glittered in winter darkness, indifferent and beautiful, containing millions of small stories of survival and struggle and occasional triumph. Marcus's story was one among many, unremarkable except to the people it touched. But those people, Lily, Victoria, Maggie, workers whose safety he protected. Strangers who'd never know his name but lived because systems functioned correctly. Those people made everything worthwhile. He'd started the year unemployed and desperate. He'd ended employed and purposeful. The gap between those states was filled with choices, consequences, courage he hadn't known he possessed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more resistance, more battles, more moments requiring him to choose between easy and right. But tomorrow could handle itself. Tonight, walking through snow with his daughter's hand in his and fireworks still echoing across the frozen lake, Marcus Reed was exactly where he needed to be.